This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. There can be only one LASIK center for Sooner Scoop, and that's Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIKs.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here, late on a Friday afternoon. A portal report to kind of check in on where things were. Oklahoma did pick up a commitment on Friday morning. Tate Sandell from UTSA makes the commitment, a kicker, which was obviously a need with the good. There is some bad. Lance Mason, the tight end out of Missouri State, has made his announcement just minutes ago, and he's headed to Wisconsin. Let's start with the good. We'll start with the good. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tate Sandell, he does commit.
Sandell.
I don't know why I said Sandell. I was thinking of David Sandell, the former Oklahoma Sooner. Tate Sandell, the kicker. Yeah, you got to make a couple kicks before I really learned your name. Austin Seibert learned the hard way. Really good. This was a position of need. Obviously, Oklahoma and Doug Deacon, Oklahoma special teams analyst, had identified. They talked about it. We had talked about it after the Crimson Combine. Oklahoma was expected to go get a kicker. You miss out on Mason Shipley, but they do get the commitment of Tate Sandell on Friday morning, George.
Yeah, this is somebody that they identified after Mason Shipley obviously visited and ended up choosing Texas over Oklahoma. He is a really good kicker. You look at his stats, very consistent from 49 or fewer yards, 17 of 18 last year for UTSA in his first year as the field goal kicker. The first year he was there, or maybe second year he was there, he was the kickoff man. And then last year he was the place kicker, 17 of 18 from 49 yards or fewer, 19 of 23 overall, career long of 54. So impressive stats. And this is somebody that Oklahoma feels like, I don't know if it'll be an open competition and he's the front runner, but I would say he's the odds-on favorite to be Oklahoma starter next year. Obviously, Liam Evans and Austin Welch, who they brought in from Kennesaw State in the winter, neither one really emerged as a guy that they felt was going to be super reliable. We saw that kind of play out at the Crimson Combine. It wasn't pretty. Grayson Miller as well was in that race from UCO. I do wonder, Eddie, with the addition of Sandell, does someone leave? Does a Liam Evans jump in the portal? Does an Austin Welch get back in the portal even though he was just in it a few months ago? That wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
Because all of a sudden now you have, 4 place kickers on roster, which is a little odd. So I don't, and it kind of does feel like the writing's on the wall. Obviously they bring in Sandell with the hope of him being the starter. So while you're happy to see him, become that starter, you wonder about some of those other guys. Would one of them look at maybe jumping in the portal?
Sure, and as you noted, he's a place kicker, but he does kick off as well. Had a school record 62 touchbacks a year ago for UTSA, and
which is great.
Yeah, right.
You definitely, think about last year. One of the big plays in the final regular season game was the kickoff to LSU that they returned for a touchdown. Got to kick it through the end zone. So, and that's something that they want to do. So he's got a big leg, and I think that this is a guy that can do both things for Oklahoma next year.
Should remind everybody, too, that the portal does close on Friday.
Yep.
So you think that if something were to happen at that kicker position, if at Austin Welch or if at Liam Evans or whomever was to decide to enter the portal, they can still enter. You have to get the paperwork in, and sometimes that takes a couple days for that to process. So if you see some names coming out on Saturday or Sunday or maybe even into early next week, don't be surprised, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
It always trickles a little longer than when the actual, quote-unquote end date is. And you also have, grad transfers and things like that. Like, I think Austin Welch would maybe be a grad transfer. Okay. So, he could enter a little bit later. But, you never know. There could be some movement there late.
Nonetheless, good news for Doug Deacon.
Yep.
Bad news for Joe John Finley. Lance Mason makes his announcement on Friday afternoon. He's headed to Wisconsin, and it was OU Wisconsin. We had talked about that on the portal report on Thursday, and we're kind of in a wait-and-see mode. He finally makes the announcement on Friday.
Yeah, and you kind of knew that this was maybe, Oklahoma, I think, felt good after his visit. But when the kid continues to go on his other visits, you just never know, right?
Well, that's kind of become a common theme.
Right.
It seems
especially
like.
in the portal. In the portal, if you can get him on campus and you can close the deal, that's what you want to do. If they continue to go on their other visits, you might still have a chance and renegotiate. And, Dominic Williams is a great example of that. He went on the OU visit, and then he went on 3 more visits, and Oklahoma still got the deal done. Lance Mason, though, my understanding, he really loved the visit to Oklahoma. I think he liked the idea of playing in Ben Arbuckle's system. I think what attracted him about Wisconsin was I think they made him a really good offer. I don't think it was much more, if any more, than what OU offered, but I think maybe he liked their system. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets, ground and pound type of game, I guess is what they're getting back to, there in Madison. But it's just a tough look for Oklahoma at tight end right now because it just feels like they can't get any wins. You lose Devon Mitchell to the transfer portal, which in the grand scheme of things probably isn't a bad loss considering what we saw this spring and all that. But the fact that he never really developed into the player that everybody thought he could be, you had to go in the winter portal and get 3 tight ends, three guys that really weren't very sought after. Like you weren't really fighting off.
You're talking about Will Huggins, Carson Kent, and John Locke.
Yeah, and you weren't really fighting anyone off to get those 3 guys. Like it wasn't a big bidding war. Whereas Lance Mason was considered somebody that several other schools wanted, like a Wisconsin. Purdue was in the mix as well. Cal. And you really wanted the kid from Cal, Jack Indrez. And you couldn't even get into that conversation. He ends up at Texas immediately after and signs with them. So it's just, I'm interested to see what Oklahoma does. I mentioned Jack Indrez. He was considered a top guy. Tanner Kozoil, who Oklahoma was interested in last portal cycle, he was at Wisconsin, ends up getting back to the portal. Now he's at Houston. Oklahoma didn't really get in that fight this time around. So I don't know, Eddie. There's not a whole lot of tight ends in the portal right now that I would say upgrade you.
Yeah.
I think that you might have to live with what you got, or maybe you add another guy that's kind of just a unknown, and maybe Will Huggins or Carson Kent or maybe Jaron Kanik becomes a really big playmaker. I think the reality is, though, Eddie, you're going to see this offense maybe not run a lot of tight end sets. I mean, you're going to see the tight end some, but don't be surprised if there's a little bit more wide receivers and different personnel out there to maybe avoid that position a bit.
The wide receiver position is something that is still a developing situation for Oklahoma. They're hosting Jer'Michael Carter today out of McNeese State. And certainly, I think now with them missing out on a tight end, does he become even bigger? He's currently on campus right now taking his visit.
Yeah, and look, obviously not a tight end, but big-bodied guy, 6'4", around 200 pounds. Very productive last year at McNeese. I think it was 30-something receptions, 500-something yards, and is it 6 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns? 3 touchdowns,
I think it was 3 touchdowns.
I think I'm confusing Lance Mason. I think he had 6
Your
touchdowns.
head's spinning with all of these tight end names right now.
But Jer'Michael Carter, good player. I think, he has become a priority for Oklahoma. They haven't gotten involved with a ton of wide receivers, but the ones that they have been mostly from small schools, big-bodied guys, almost kind of like a Giovanni Gibson, right? Like when you think about trying to maybe having to replace him early in the year next year, they're kind of going after the same type of player. He visited Baylor on Thursday, got into Norman this morning, is on campus now. The plan is to not let him leave campus, right? They're throwing everything at him that they got. You wonder, some money maybe is freed up now that you didn't get Lance Mason. Do you turn some of that money to Carter and say, hey, don't take any more visits? He's supposed to go to Tennessee on Monday. Tennessee's in on a couple other wide receivers, so maybe that helps Oklahoma out. But it's going to be interesting because I do think if he ends up taking that Tennessee visit, it's kind of like Lance Mason. It's like all of a sudden, I wouldn't say that OU doesn't have a chance anymore, but it makes it a heck of a lot more difficult. So I think they're going to try and close the deal. I know he's having dinner with John Mateer tonight. Surely John Mateer seems like a guy that would be a really good recruiter. Maybe he can close this thing out for Oklahoma. We'll see. So he is the next guy to keep an eye on. Other than that, there's not a whole lot more going on in the portal for Oklahoma right now.
Where do you think John Mateer takes him tonight? A little ranch?
Probably
maybe?
the ranch, I would think. Trying to think where
Benvenutis would be
I know that's usually
be 1B
a big
if you
spot.
can't get into 1A, which would be the ranch.
Charleston's.
Ooh, Charleston's. I knew you were going to say that.
I love Charleston's.
We'll be covering it all weekend, obviously, with the latest developments on Jer'Michael Carter. It certainly seems like maybe that's going to end up being something that could be fruitful for Oklahoma and Emmett Jones as they continue to try to add to that wide receiver room. And, as we talked about a little bit on the Around the Corner today that you can see here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this thing kind of develops over the next couple of days, and especially at that wide receiver position.
For sure. And I think that they like their wide receiver position. They've got a lot of new faces in there. Think about this, Eddie. I was writing this today. If they were to add Carter, that'd be the 5th transfer wide receiver they've taken since the end of the season. Obviously, they add the 2 true freshmen in Manny Choice and Elijah Thomas. 7 new guys in that room. And obviously, you have some returning guys, Deion Burks, Zion Kearney, Ivan Carrion, that could all play for you next year. But you're looking at a room that could look totally different than it did a year ago.
Suppose that you're not just terribly worried about all these guys having to gain chemistry, because you would have to be doing that anyways. Even the guys that were on the team in 2024 having to do that with John Mateer. You did get a spring with him. It'll be kind of, I guess, interesting to just see how.
Yeah, well, you got to pick it up fast, because you got Michigan coming in here week 2. You hope that chemistry can build over the summer, and I know Mateer has talked about he's going to put some stuff together to work on some of that this summer. But it is interesting to think of how many new guys are in there, and I do think though that this is a very wide receiver friendly offense. Ben Arbuckle's going to get guys open. Guys just have to catch the football.
Oklahoma did lose a quarterback on Thursday evening. Cole Gonzalez puts his name into the portal. He wasn't in Norman for too long, coming in during the spring, going through spring football for Oklahoma after playing at Western Carolina, a teammate of Derek Simmons. Not too surprising in a way. And in fact, I put it on the message board on Thursday night. I think people will be maybe even surprised. I don't know where he's going to end up, but I do think that Cole Gonzalez can play some football at a G5 level or wherever he ends up.
I think ultimately Oklahoma, I don't think wanted to lose Cole Gonzalez. Sure. I think that they think he's a good player. He understands the system, played in a very similar situation at Western Carolina a year ago. So I think that they didn't want to lose him. He's a good arm, a guy that obviously Michael Hawkins is the backup, but I could have seen a situation where Cole Gonzalez has to play next year if John Mateer gets hurt or Michael Hawkins gets hurt or whatever. I think it's more from Cole's perspective. He feels like he can go start somewhere or at least compete for a starting job somewhere. Obviously, he was a starter the last couple of years at Western Carolina. I wonder where he's going to end up. I think that he could end up, like you said, at a G5 where maybe he's in a quarterback competition and playing for somebody. I look at a place like Tulane. Yeah. I think he could play for Tulane and probably do pretty well.
You say that, and TJ Finley, who had transferred into Tulane, entered the portal himself today. A little bit of a different situation with the indefinite suspension following, I believe it was he had possession of a stolen car, which is kind of cool. But, it'll be interesting. I do think that Cole Gonzalez ends up playing some football somewhere next year. I think so, too. And probably taking some pretty good amount of snaps at that. Yeah. Oklahoma at 4 commitments right now out of the transfer portal. Jaden Ott, Jake Mikailu, Ricky Lolohia. Yeah. That's going to take some time. And Tate Sandell joining the party today. We'll be covering.
I think they'll get at least one more.
Okay, so 5.
Yep, I think it'll be around. So I think it'll be.
Would
5.
You say under 5.5 if I said the over under was 5.5?
I don't know. I still think they might try to add a tight end. I just don't know how. I just the market's not great right now at tight end. I'm going to say under. But if you told me they ended up with 6, I wouldn't bet on it, Eddie. Yeah, I think it's going to be 5 or 6.
I was asking you the other day. It seems like the portal, even though it's going to close, it could extend out beyond the beginning of next week, maybe even into next week and the week after.
If they miss out on Carter, I think they're going to go back to the well and try and go after somebody else at receiver. Or, maybe they go back to the well and try to add somebody else at tight end. Sure. So I think this could very much go into next week.
And certainly be keeping an eye on the cornerback position. It just doesn't seem like right now, much like the tight end market, you'd be better off maybe just rolling with some of the freshmen that came in a year ago. So be covering it. Keeping you up to date on Soonerscoop.com. A great time to join with everything that is happening in the portal. Bob Prisbillo going to be over at Love's Field for the start of the OU Texas weekend. That's a 5 o'clock start on Friday for the first game. Oklahoma baseball going into a rubber game after losing 10-9 on Friday afternoon to Georgia. Pretty exciting comeback. You're down 9-2 after the 5th and had a chance. Really made them sweat for a second. So for George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. Everybody have a good weekend out there. We'll see you here on Monday on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel.